And hello and good afternoon to whoever's out there yet on this glorious, glorious afternoon in Pittsburgh. When I say glorious, that of course assumes you like it being belting hot. But Dennis, hello. What would Friday afternoon be indeed? And you're right, Shelley, they really do roll around so quickly because I'm the one who has to get ready for them. But yeah, I would miss doing these now. Friday is webinar day. Monday is wash day, and Wednesday is staff meeting day, and Friday is webinar day. What more could you wish for? Sequence in your life. And especially for those who join me live. And also for those of you who are not there live, but will be watching this on the YouTube channel, welcome to YouTube. But always feel free to join us because it's nice to get together over Friday afternoon. And yes, we are very much thanking the Allegheny Foundation, who have graciously sponsored the whole year of webinars, which is a double-edged sword. At least they're all paid for, and it means we've got to keep doing them every day, every Friday for a year. But we'd be doing that anyway because we love it. And as long as you're there to listen, we'll be here to talk. YouTube channel, if you want to find out what's coming up and what's happening, and if you want to view any of the previous webinars all the way through back to last March, it's there on the YouTube channel. If you go to the website, you will now see a button right on the front page saying webinars. All you have to do is click on that. Go to the website, click on webinar, and you'll find a plethora of joy there waiting for you. Jared from Dublin, hi, welcome. Good that you're joining us. How is the weather in Dublin? There's Grace, also in Dublin. Rainy evening in Dublin. Yes, indeed. The famous Eliza line. I'll be coming to that point, in fact. Raining in Dublin, not raining here. Hello, David. Welcome to you. It's very hot here. In fact, this week we've been having temperatures in the high 80s in Fahrenheit, which in real European money would be 31, 32 degrees in the middle of May. If it's like that now, what in the name of all that's holy is it going to be like in July and August? I dread to think. And we haven't had a drop of rain for a week, and I don't think we've got any rain coming for at least another week. Hello, FitzJamie1. Good you're with us in Boston at the moment. Yes, did everybody celebrate Eliza Doolittle Day? I didn't even know it was Eliza Doolittle Day until somebody pointed it out. I mean, it's bad enough trying to remember all the other days, Shakespeare's birthday and Oscar Wilde.
You were brilliantly timing.
Yes, I am also brilliant, as it's just been shouted at me by my colleague in the corner. I was brilliantly timing this particular webinar to fit that. Actually, I didn't even know about it. Okay, stormy weather in Holland. Oh my goodness me. I presume that the tulip season is over in the Netherlands now, so they're not all being destroyed. That's all over and done with, I imagine, by now. I don't know if any of you have ever been into the Netherlands in tulip season, but it's quite phenomenal, the look of it. So if you have any questions about today's topic, do put them into the chat or send us an email. By the way, Grace from Dublin, you did send me an email with a really fascinating set of questions about Ibsen. I've passed them on to Marty Giles, and he will be responding to them in due time because he was intrigued by your question. So thank you for doing that. And that's a message for all of you. If you have any questions, if you disagree with me on any point, do feel free. Yeah, well, it's nice that you make the virtual trip to virtual Pittsburgh. And one of these days all of you will have to come and visit because it's a lovely city to visit. Hello, James from Crafton. Welcome. Always good to see you're there. And thank you for your generous contribution. James is a very, very good, loyal supporter. And on that very topic, let me, of course, remind you, which I'll be doing at the end as well. We're about to enter hello, Ken. We're about to enter our 25th season. We are looking for all the support we can get. And as I always say every week, every dollar counts. And if you can only slip $5 into the donation, or €5, or whatever your local currency is, if you can slip 10 in, if you can slip 20, wonderful. If you can do 25, I love you forever. But please, please consider giving us a small donation. Whatever you have in your pocket, think of putting that in, and it will help us considerably as we go into the 25th season. It's very special for us because it's not just celebrating the last 25 years of Pict, it's really launching the next 25 years of Pict. So, also, yes, coming up on June 16th, we will have our digital celebration of Bloomsday and the journey of Leopold Bloom through the city of Dublin, based on by James Joyce on the legend of Ulysses, the Homeric journey back to Ithaca. So we'll be doing some readings of that. There'll be space throughout the day, the way we did last year. It was very popular last year. We're really delighted. This year, we're going to add one extra voice into it. I'm going to read one, just to, add grist to the mill, as it were, or a little bit of doubling to the event. But that'll be on June 16th. There'll be all sorts of information on it. And if you're on our emailing list, you'll be getting an email about it as well. Hello, James from White Oak. And William from Delmont. Bill and Joan, welcome to you. It's nice to see all those regulars tuning in. I do hope you're telling all your friends about this as well, because the more people who join us, the happier we will be. And most especially, we hope you're telling your friends to actually subscribe to the YouTube channel, because the more subscriptions we get, the better we feel. The more loved we feel, the happier we are. We can enter into Fridays with a song in our heart and a dance in our footsteps. So please, do tell your friends. We are here every Friday, and they don't have to just listen to me, they can argue with me as well. So, which is really the fun of it, isn't it? As I say with these webinars and just about everything else I ever say, everything I tell you may be wrong. So the motto of the day is, prove me wrong. But you're always welcome to make your donations, make a contribution, be it fiscal or intellectual. We want to hear from you. It's great when we do, because the best way to change thinking and develop thinking is by debate. So feel free to debate. How are we doing? We'll give it another 30 seconds, just in case somebody is skidding to a halt and pulling into a car park. Oh no. What the hell? Let's start anyway. It's too nice a day. You don't want to be hanging around at the end of it. Let's get going now. Pygmalion, or What We Think We Want. Now, I chose that title because in terms of classic theatre, classic literature, anything to do with words, and words are an expression of thought, classic poetry, whatever. Very often, what we think we want isn't quite what we actually need or actually want. And George Bernard Shaw, being a Dubliner, being an Irishman, understood the irony of what we think we want very well indeed. And George Bernard Shaw, being a man of not only of letters, but of opinions, and by God, did he have opinions. He chose, well, I believe, one of the reasons he chose to write this play was not simply because it was a good story, but because it had very important messages to tell us. And I'll come to one of his motivations for writing it in a few moments. But anyway, where does Pygmalion, such a strange word, Pygmalion, where does it come from? Well, it comes from the legend of Pygmalion and Galatea. Now, again, my source material for the basic information, because I do try to give you as accurate a piece of information as I can. And if I don't have Britannica, I have Wikipedia. And so the first major Pygmalion escapade, as it was, which comes from, it says here, Book 10 of Ovid's Metamorphosis, or Metamorphosis, depending on where you're saying it. Pygmalion was, in this, a Cypriot sculptor from Cyprus who carved a woman out of ivory. If it was a full-size woman, it must have been a very big elephant to produce the ivory. But anyway, carved this woman out of ivory, according to Ovid, and he wanted something extremely pure. He wanted to represent this woman as something pure. He'd according to Ovid, Pygmalion had seen the Propoetides, if I pronounce that correctly, prostituting themselves. Pygmalion declared that he was not interested in women, having seen what women got up to. Then so he created this beautiful statue in ivory, but he found that it was so beautiful and so realistic that he fell in love with it. In time, Aphrodite's festival day came, and Pygmalion made offerings on the altar of Aphrodite, and too scared to actually openly admit his desire, he very quietly wished for a bride who would be the living likeness of my ivory girl. When he returned home, it was his wont to kiss the ivory statue, and he felt that the lips on the statue were now warm. So he kissed it again and found that the ivory had lost its hardness. Aphrodite had granted Pygmalion's wish, not what he wished for, that he would have a woman as beautiful as his statue, but that the statue itself came to life, became real. Very important point, that became a real girl. Pygmalion married the ivory sculpture, which was now a woman, and in Ovid's narrative they had a daughter, Paphos, of whom the city in Cyprus, Paphos, is allegedly derived. Now, since Ovid, which was quite a long time ago, there have been multiple variations on this theme of Pygmalion and Galatea, that somebody has a wish for something to become real, or that their wish should become a reality. Goethe had a version of the Ovid tale with a statue which he named Elise. But this notion of gaining what you desire by causing change by touch also occurs in other myths. For instance, King Midas. And most of you will know the legend of Midas. His wish was that all he touched, everything he touched, would turn to gold, which was a great idea because the wish was granted and everything he touched, he was never short of gold. You know, had a teacup in front of him, touch it, it's a gold teacup. That he got his wish, but it wasn't really what he wished for, because everything went brilliantly well until he touched his daughter and ended up with a gold statue of his daughter, a kind of reverse Pygmalion and Galatea. So getting what you wish for isn't always a good plan. Oscar Wilde reminds us, we should never forget Oscar's dictum, when the gods wish to punish us, they answer our prayers. A very wise observation. Be careful what you wish for. You may get it. There's the old Jewish joke. How do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. I'd really like this, God. Oh, well, see what you're going to get. Wishing for what we want must be very carefully examined, because the consequences usually are not what we expect, not what we hope for, not what we pray for. There's another variation on this particular story, which might surprise you, but when you think about it, it is the Pygmalion Galatea story. And it is the story of Pinocchio, because you have a wooden boy who wishes to be transformed into a real boy. Now, in this case, because it's a variation, and all good classic tales are made better by the variations on them, rather than by the constant repetition of the same theme. With King Midas, you have the reversal. Instead of the beautiful statue of ivory turning into a living girl, you have a living girl turning into a beautiful statue of gold. It's the same basic thing, but it's looking at those variations. Pinocchio is Pygmalion and Galatea. In this case, the statue, or in this case, the puppet, and not its creator, Geppetto, the puppet, Pinocchio, is the one who makes the wish. Geppetto is quite happy with the puppet, but the puppet wants to be real. It is the puppet who asks for the divine powers, or the blue fairy, or whatever you want to call it, to perform the miracle. Even Shakespeare used the legend with a variation on it as a theme in the play The Winter's Tale. By the end of the play, we've had this situation, and I'm not going to go through the whole play, but Hermione was accused of being an adulteress. They asked the god Apollo. Apollo said that Hermione was telling the truth when she said no, and Leontes says the oracle is lying, and Hermione immediately goes off stage, and when they come on, report that she's dead. At the end of the play, we have this statue of Hermione. And to bring us to the conclusion, Leontes must demonstrate regret and grief and wish that she was alive. And of course, lo and behold, to bring the conclusion to a happy ending, the statue becomes the living Queen Hermione again. So again, it's another variation on that same concept. You get what you wish for, but you may not get what you wish for, may not be what you actually want. Which brings us to Shaw. And Pygmalion is probably, I would say, arguably, George Bernard Shaw's most popular and enduring play. And this may be because of, maybe thanks to Broadway and the land of movies and Hollywood. The creation of the musical My Fair Lady certainly has made Pygmalion as a play, even if people may never have seen or read Pygmalion, everybody knows the story. The success of those productions, I think, are undoubtedly due to the fact that most of the dialogue in the musical and in the movie is actually taken directly from the original play. In fact, not many people know this. There was a movie of it many, many years ago with Wendy Hiller and Leslie Howard. And for that reason, George Bernard Shaw became the only person ever to win the Nobel Prize for Literature and an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. Not many people who've won the Nobel Prize for Literature can say that. The fact that the musical and the movie are really the play Pygmalion set to music shows you just the power of the way he wrote and the brilliance of the way he wrote. You couldn't improve on it. You cannot out-Shaw Shaw. What makes the play an undoubted classic and a play for all time, which those of you who've heard me rambling before know that's my definition of a classic, a play that is true of its time and for all time. What makes it a classic is its principal topic. And its main topic is not the plot. Its main topic is that slightly ominous undertone that Shaw always manages to offer to us. Every play he writes, there's something ominous going on in the background. You're laughing away and you're thinking, well, what's he really saying? What's he up to? The main topic in that sense is the very human desire to be, and I forgive my rough Cockney, to be better than what we are. And the equal desire in us to make other people in our own image. We all want to do it. We want people to be like us. It's a human instinct. We want to be better than what we are, and we want everybody else to be like us. A very dangerous philosophy, and Shaw was very aware of that. Now, the source material for his play may have come from antiquity, but the story of Pygmalion and Galatea, or in any of its variations, like all classic tales, is a lesson in human vulnerability. It's a lesson for us all. We become vulnerable when we become the victim of our own desires, our own wishes. And because of the musical and the movie, I think that very few of us don't know the actual story. And the actual story is that you have Professor Henry Higgins, an authority on dialect and pronunciation and phonetics, agrees to teach a very common flower girl with an atrocious Cockney accent how to speak with refinement so that she can be a lady in a flower shop. That's it. There's your plot laid out. Terribly easy. Indeed, Higgins goes one step further. He actually accepts a challenge to pass her off, not just simply as a lady in a flower shop, but as a duchess. So in other words, Pygmalion and Galatea, the underclass flower girl will be brought to life. The common clay of which she is made will be remolded, and she will be brought to life, or rather a new life, through phonetics. That the magic will occur. She will turn from the common clay to a duchess. That's her wish, that she become a lady. That's his desire, that he can do this. Shaw doesn't just leave it at that. We are speaking of George Bernard Shaw, who was, as we talked about just a couple of weeks ago with Marty Giles, was deeply influenced by Ibsen. And there is an incredibly strong line of feminism throughout this play. Eliza is not just a common flower girl. And as it reveals itself throughout the play, she is a woman with self-determination, with intellect, with common to garden intelligence. It's just that she's never had an opportunity to express it. But this line of feminism exists right the way through the play, not just for Eliza, but also for the housekeeper, Mrs. Pierce, and for Higgins' mother, who is extremely modern in that sense. But Eliza isn't just for Higgins. She is an object of experimentation. She is that common clay that he can mold. But she isn't just the object of experiment for Higgins. She is also an object for sale by her father. And there we come to the point. When he wrote the play, there was a very, very famous case in London of, I think the man was a coal porter. He's a guy who carried coal to houses. I'm not sure. Rather like Alfred Doolittle in the play, is a dustman. The real guy was a coal porter, and he was suffering from extreme levels of poverty, and they couldn't feed their younger kids. Anyway, story goes he actually sold his daughter to a gentleman, which was even then considered rather appalling, in that the whole of the UK under Gladstone and various others was fighting against the level of prostitution that had happened, getting girls off the street, getting young boys out of prostitution, all of that. So then this story hit of this man, perfectly an ordinary guy, family guy, sold his daughter. And that was also in Shaw's, has to have been in Shaw's mind when he put this together. Because that's exactly what happens in the play. That Alfred Doolittle, lovely man that he is, actually comes to Higgins and does a deal. And basically sells his daughter to Higgins for a £5 note. Won't take £10 because he wouldn't spend that. He says rather amusingly, "Don't worry, Governor, it won't go to waste. I'll have drunk it all by tomorrow." But that's an element that is part of Shaw's intention, that you see that this is a commercial transaction and that Eliza is considered and regarded by Higgins as common clay to be molded and by her father as an object to be sold. So let's look at Higgins' attitude to the common clay. And I'm going to read a fair bit of text during the course of this webinar, but nobody says it better than Shaw does. He looks at her in the very first scene when he's talking to his friend Pickering. And he describes her. "You see this creature with her curbstone English." Now that's one of the first ways he actually describes her curbstone English. From the first time he opens his mouth, he is dismissive of what she is. The English that will keep her in the gutter to the end of her days. That is insulting and also a political reality, a social reality. And I'll come back to that point later. But Higgins looks at her and says, "Well, sir, in 3 months, I could pass that girl off as a duchess at an ambassador's garden party. I could even get her a place as a lady's maid or a shop assistant, which requires better English." Shaw being amusing, but it is also a truism. The middle classes always speak better than the aristocracy. But his opinion of her is decidedly unpleasant. He talks about the way she speaks. And again, this is the point that Shaw was hammering home. We talk about the way they speak. Sidebar point here. A few years after this, or around this time, there was a commission set up by the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, to establish what became known as BBC English, the correct way to speak, the correct way to pronounce words, so that there was a uniformity. We now know it in the theatre profession as received pronunciation. Well, it used to be known as BBC English. And one of the people sitting on that commission was a master phonetician himself, George Bernard Shaw, which I find ironic because Shaw was a Dubliner and retains his Dublin brogue right through to the end of his days, even though he spent most of his life living in England. Anyway, we judge people, excuse me, and Higgins definitely judges purely on the way you sound, on the way you speak. "A woman," he says, "who utters such depressing and disgusting sounds has no right to be anywhere, no right to live." And he turns to her, "Remember, you are a human being with a soul and the divine gift of articulate speech, that your native language is the language of Shakespeare and Milton and the Bible, and don't sit there crooning like a bilious pigeon." So we get this instant picture, this tremendous image of what Higgins considers to be right, beautiful, and how much he will dismiss anything that doesn't meet that standard. Pygmalion did not want a woman because women were disgusting, so he carved a statue in ivory to make something that was perfect. This notion that a thing must be conventionally beautiful for it to be beautiful. Beauty cannot exist without that conventional understanding of it. And this is a point that Shaw is making again. Higgins' first instinct is to reject this common clay. He says he can do it, but he says, "No, I couldn't be bothered." But it is the clay itself, Eliza, just like Pinocchio, who actually wants to change. It's Eliza who starts this process of transformation. It is she who makes the wish, like Pinocchio, for Pinocchio to be a real boy, for Eliza to be a real lady in a flower shop. That's all she wants. That is her wish. Be careful what you wish for. So in the play, she visits Higgins' home, and it's Pickering, a friend, who actually asks her, gets down to the basics. "What is it you want, my girl?" And she replies with this simple and apparently very uncomplicated answer. "I want to be a lady in a flower shop." instead of selling at the corner of Tottenham Court Road. But they won't take me unless I can talk more genteel. He said he could teach me. Well, here I am, ready to pay him, not asking any favour, and he treats me as if I was dirt. A lot of important points in there. She wants to be a lady in a flower shop. She cannot. She knows flowers. She works in Covent Garden. She probably understands flowers more than most people in flower shops. But they won't take her unless she talks more genteel-like. She comes willing to pay. In other words, she is ready to invest in her own future. This is not a nobody. This is not somebody with an imagination that can say, I'll take my money and I'll invest it in me. And all you do is treat me like dirt because of the way I speak. Shaw was a Fabian, which would be nowadays considered extreme left-wing. In fact, in his day it wasn't, but he was a decided liberal by any stretch of the imagination. Now, that's the important point at this juncture. She is no common piece of clay, and neither is she a statue of marble or ivory or gold, nor is she a wooden puppet. She was not created by Higgins, who she would have as her Pygmalion. She was not created by him. She existed in her own right, but she comes to him as the kind of deity to grant this wish. She is already a living girl. And as she relentlessly reminds us through the first two acts of the play, I'm a good girl, I am. And that's an important point as well. She is a good girl. She is somebody who guards her reputation. She is somebody who has a sense of herself. But what holds her back? That she is of the gutter, that her speech is of the gutter, that her language is of the gutter, that her thoughts are of the gutter. There's nothing wrong with the gutter if that's where you live. Where you live, everything is fine. It's when you try to change or when you try to be something else that all the problems occur. And she has fallen into the temptation of what she thinks she wants to be better, whatever that may mean. And Higgins falls to a temptation as well. He looks at her when she asks this, and his response is, it's almost irresistible. Why? He goes on. She's so deliciously low, so horribly dirty. Eliza responds to that, and we laugh at it. And I'll talk about the laughing at her again in a few moments. But her response is, I ain't dirty. I'll wash me face and hands before I come, I did. That's not just funny. It's a distinct indication of the way Eliza Doolittle thinks. She is already a lady. She just doesn't sound like one. She doesn't speak like one. But in her head, in here, she already is what she wishes to be. But she thinks what she wishes to be is something different. But Higgins is hooked. The ego is amazing. Ego is an amazing thing. The things we all think we can do and we can't. Oh, well. But he's hooked not for love of the flower girl, but for the love of his own power, his skill, if you like, his Midas touch. The curse for King Midas was not that everything he touched turned to gold, was that he believed that everything he touched should turn to gold and didn't think of the consequences. So in this sense, the Pygmalion and Galatea theme is shifting slightly with Higgins towards the King Midas version. It is pointed out to him by his friend Pickering, this may not be a good plan. This may not work out the way you want it. Pickering is acting as a kind of spiritual guide in a way. Pickering is always very, very aware of, don't tell the gods your plans. because they may grant your wishes. But Higgins rejects that notion. What is life but a series of inspired follies, he says. And God, we find that such an attractive idea. Oh, isn't life wonderful? We just take risks and it's really great and exciting. What we forget is we tend to be taking risks with other people's lives. Inspired follies, he describes it. The difficulty is finding them to do. Never lose a chance. It doesn't come every day. I shall make a duchess of this draggle-tailed gutter snipe. Still, he can't just call her a young woman. Still, he is constantly contrasting what he perceives her as and what he can turn her into. He's trying to assume a godlike position here. Yes, he goes on, in 6 months, 3 if she's a good ear and a quick tongue, I'll take her anywhere and pass her off as anything. We will start today, now, this moment, and so it begins. He has become not merely in loco parentis, he has become the deity that will cause the world to change. His ego, his passion is not for Eliza, his passion is for what he can make Eliza become. The transformation will be the fulfillment of his ambition, basically. We're still within that same bracket of the original fundamental structure. Anyway, we find quickly, and Shaw demonstrates quickly, that life doesn't work that way. That is too simplistic from both of them, too simplistic a view of what they truly want as opposed to what they think they want. Good diction and good table manners does not a lady make. Very important point. No matter what you sound like, no matter how you behave, that's not what truly makes you a lady or a gentleman. The next time we meet Eliza, she's at tea with Higgins and Higgins' mother and some real middle-class genteel folk. He has been working with her for some months. He has now taught her phonetic. I mean, the whole scene about the rain in Spain, that doesn't happen in the play. It's only in the musical and the movie. And the Hartford, Hereford, and Hampshire hurricanes hardly happen. That's not in the play. But it was in Shaw's version of the movie, and Lerner and Lowe took it over. But when we see her, she's already learned to speak. So we left her with this appalling Covent Garden, Lisson Grove Cockney accent. And the next time we see her, she is dressed magnificently. She enters beautifully. She sits down and she speaks perfect English. But, as I say, good diction and good table manners does not a lady make. And we have what is a very funny scene. Because she is speaking her mind. She is speaking her thoughts. The thoughts of Eliza Doolittle have not changed. Only her diction, only her dress, only her capacity to move and grin and stick your pinky out when you drink your cup of tea and all of those things. But her conversation, what goes on in her mind, is still from the background from which she came. Now, is Shaw teaching us a lesson here? I think he is. Is the lingua franca of our background no less legitimate than that of those who can talk proper? We instinctively react to those who speak with a different accent or dialect. That's first point. We have a kind of an inbuilt, as I say, we want people to be like us. It's a human instinct. It's part of tribalism. It's part of it goes back to, when hunter-gatherers finally gathered together in caves and also started digging in the ground and planting things to create families, to create villages, to create cities, we want our people, we do that. It's an appalling human instinct, but it is a human instinct. We want people to sound like us. We resent having to learn somebody else's language. But also the geographic, the racial, the educational differences in the way we hear people can influence our attitude to them and to what they say. Shaw understood this because he was an Irishman with a distinct Dublin accent in a very English Britain. But if we are being talked to by somebody who sounds like us, looks like us, and particularly sounds like us, we will listen more positively than if we have to work out what accent are they speaking in. It's a human instinct. It's wrong, but it is a human instinct. We like people to sound the same as us. We talk about people's, very often when you ask somebody, whether you've just met somebody, what are they like? Oh, well, they have a very funny accent, or speak strange, or I get it all the time. Where are you? Are you English? No, I'm Irish. I knew by your accent you were something. Not who are you, what do you do, but why do you talk in that funny way? Human instinct. So in this particular scene, Eliza, having been asked a perfectly casual small talk question, because nobody talks about anything important in this kind of society, gives a very honest answer. She gives a very vivid description of her aunt having gin forced down her throat by her father, and treats that as being perfectly reasonable. Because it is perfectly reasonable for a flower girl from Covent Garden. But in the accents of middle-class London, in the drawing room of a refined lady and her guests, it does become something to ridicule. The line being, "My aunt died of influenza, so they said. But it's my belief they done the old woman in. Why should she die of influenza? She come through diphtheria right enough the year before. I saw her with my own eyes. Fairly blue with it she was. They all thought she was dead, but my father, he kept ladling gin down her throat till she came to so sudden that she bit the bowl off the spoon." Now, because that story belongs in a different social order, but spoken in the middle-class correctness that Higgins has instilled in her, we laugh at it. It's funny. But the liberal-minded Shaw is showing us that what you have to say, what opinions you hold, will always be heard by the prejudiced ear of the listener. And in this case, the audience has that prejudiced ear. We find that the story, which belongs in a rich Cockney accent, is being spoken in an upper class or a middle class correct English accent, and therefore becomes an absurdity. It's a contradiction. We're no longer listening to what she's saying. We're listening to how inappropriate it is in the way she speaks. But he knows that because we have this inbuilt prejudice built into our psyche, we will laugh at her. It's inevitable. There's no comedy without pain. Now, it's at this point in the story that Higgins begins to lose control of his creation. And that's where Shaw takes over from Ovid and Goethe and Pinocchio and Midas. Although Midas, I think, is closer here. By the time we get our next meeting with Eliza, she has become everything she thought she wanted. She has been taken to the ambassador's ball, where she was thought not to be a duchess, but a princess. Everything that she and Higgins wanted has happened. The common clay has been transformed into this articulate, intelligent, beautifully spoken, beautifully poised princess. She has now learned what to say and what not to say. She has learned to discuss things correctly, appropriately. So everything that they wanted has happened, or has it? Because Higgins, having made his, taken his his common clay, and as far as he's concerned, created his Galatea, created this new woman, has become bored with the whole thing. His reaction to the ball, where Eliza absolutely fulfilled his best expectations, his reaction is totally selfish. To him, she is still the common clay. He doesn't see what he has in fact helped to create. Another important point in Shaw's construction, that for Higgins, Eliza will always be that common clay, because he knows the trick. She is the performing circus beast, the elephant up on the little podium, or the tiger in the cage rearing up at the crack of the whip. He discusses it with Pickering after the ball. Speaking of Eliza, she wasn't nervous. I knew she'd be all right. No, it's the strain of putting the job through all these 3 months that's told on me. It was interesting enough at first, while we were at the phonetics, but after that I got deadly sick of it. If I hadn't backed myself to do it, I should have shut the whole thing up 2 months ago. It was a silly notion. The whole thing's been a bore. The whole thing, the recreation, the altering of the nature of another human being, has been a bore. I tell you, Pickering, he goes on, never again for me. No more artificial duchesses. The whole thing has been a simple purgatory. Now, this is a classic example of, as it were, the artist molding the clay, but never letting the clay go. She's not anything different. It was a boring exercise. I wish I hadn't bothered. So much for his art of creation. For Eliza, the disappointment is also growing, because she's beginning to realize something even infinitely more important. Okay, Higgins treats her appallingly. He's rude. He has no regard for her. He's not even showing not even a grain of gratitude for what she has achieved. But she's also beginning to realize something else, that in the process of turning from ivory to girl, from wooden puppet to boy, from flower girl to lady, she's lost something very important, her identity. She has lost who she was. She has lost the ability to tell the story of her father pouring gin down her aunt's throat. She's lost all of that. She is a lady, and she is not a lady. She is not a flower girl. She is not a duchess. She is not a princess. She has lost her identity. She cannot see any future for herself. It's, you take the common clay, you make something beautiful of it, then what do you do? Well, I'm bored with it. I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know. What am I? There is that dilemma. When you get what you think you want, it probably isn't what you wanted. Higgins sees no problem for her. I mean, if she wants a future, she can get a future. She can go work in a flower shop. Or she can get a husband. And he makes the comment, his mother will find her a husband. Eliza's response to that is wonderful. We were above that at the corner of Tottenham Court Road. I sold flowers. I didn't sell myself. Now you've made a lady of me. I'm not fit to sell anything else. I wish you'd left me where you found me. There's that moment. Wonderful moment when you got what you wished for and suddenly realize how wrong that wish was. That what you were was real. That Pinocchio was real when he was a puppet. Now he's a boy. He's like everybody else. He was unique when he was a puppet that could walk and talk. But now he's just nothing. That you can turn everything you like to gold, but if you touch a living, beautiful thing and it turns to a gold statue, it is nothing. It has no uniqueness, no originality, nothing. And Eliza, at this moment, that is how she perceives herself, as nothing. She begins to realize that hopes and reality are two very different things. But the one thing she hasn't lost is her honesty. Because it was honesty that brought her to Higgins in the first place. She came willing to pay. She made that intellectual choice. I can make myself better if I go to this man, give him some money, he will help me change. That's an honesty. And also, she will now plan to leave him honestly. That little grain of the original Eliza is still somewhere deep inside. She won't take anything. She asks him, she has to leave with the clothes on her back because the clothes she came in were burnt a long time ago. But even the clothes on her back she doesn't own. It's part of this creation that she has been made into. I'm sorry, she says. I'm only a common ignorant girl. In my station I have to be careful. Will you please tell me what belongs to me and what doesn't? She will only take that which is legally hers. So that there's something of the original Eliza still there deep down. When you mold the clay and reshape it, when you carve the wood, the sap is still in there somewhere. When you mold the clay, it may become alabaster, but it is of clay that it is made. And it's interesting that this is the point at which she comes to realize what being a lady actually means. It's not about speaking well or having good table manners or understanding vacuous small talk. Not about any of that. She was wrong when she made the assumption that in order to improve herself, she had to speak better or behave better. Yeah, maybe to get herself a job. Maybe, we all pad out our resumes now and again. But she's beginning to realize that what she had been looking for is not reality. It's something quite different. And she actually learns it not from Higgins, but from Pickering. And remember, what Higgins taught her was how to speak proper. He taught her how to sound like us, like people like us. To come into society, you must sound like society. To come into society, you must behave. You must look like you're part of society. You must wear the proper clothes. You must hold the teacup in the correct way. And you mustn't talk about your father ladling gin. But she learns the truth of what she seeks. She learns the essence of that transformation from Pickering. She says to him, it's not because you paid for my dresses. I know you're generous to everyone with money. But it was from you that I learned really nice manners. And that's what makes one a lady, isn't it? You see, it was very difficult for me with the example of Professor Higgins always before me. I was brought up to be just like him, unable to control myself, using bad language on the slightest provocation. And I should never have known that ladies and gentlemen didn't behave like that if you hadn't been there. Higgins' example of what it was to be, of how her dream should be fulfilled, was the mechanical exercises, but without any soul behind it. Higgins, the Pygmalion of this particular case, merely wanted to create the sculpture and bring it to a living state. But always knowing that that sculpture, that living state of sculpture, was just the common clay, and having no regard for it. When Pickering points out that he couldn't teach her the things that Higgins had taught her, he couldn't do that. She goes on, because this is a great discovery. And again, I think part of Shaw's deep message. She talks about the exercises that Higgins gave her, and she says it was just like learning to dance in a fashionable way. There was nothing more to it than that. But do you know what began my real education? And it was such a simple thing. You calling me Miss Doolittle the day I first came to Wimpole Street. That was the beginning of self-respect for me. And there is the point. Why do we want things to change? Why do we look for something better? What is it the things we want? The things we want that will make us feel better about ourselves. the things we want that will make us feel more acceptable within a society. Self-respect. That is such a hard thing to achieve. And here Shaw is saying is, what begins self-respect is by being treated with respect. There were 100 little, she goes on, there were 100 little things you never noticed because they came naturally to you. Things about standing up and taking off your hat and opening doors. Things that showed you thought and felt about me as if I was something better than a scullery maid. Though, of course, I know you would have been just the same to a scullery maid if she'd been let into the drawing room. And there is Shaw's point. It's not by learning how to speak proper. It's not learning how to behave in society, what the proper order of things, which knife and fork to use. That has nothing to do with class, with true class, with being a lady or a gentleman. It is respect for yourself and for others. She goes on, you never took your boots off in the dining room when I was there. You treated me with respect. She goes on again. Really and truly, apart from the things everyone can pick up, the dressing and the proper way of speaking and so on, the difference between a lady and a flower girl is not how she behaves, but how she is treated. I will always be a flower girl to Professor Higgins because he always treats me as a flower girl and always will. But I know I can be a lady to you because you always treat me as a lady and always will. And there is Shaw's point. It's a great lesson that Shaw wants us to see and to learn, because Eliza has to learn it too. What we think we want and what we actually want can be so similar and yet so completely different. And what Eliza finally discovers that she wants is self-respect and the respect of others for who she is, not for how she sounds or how she dresses or how she behaves, but for who she fundamentally is, that core within her. And Pickering is the perfect example. He becomes the angel of goodness within this context because he is the one who treats her as a lady, not as a flower girl. She is a flower girl, but he treats her as a lady because she is a lady as well. And there is a tragedy in this discovery. The arrow of time moves forward, and so does the arrow of experience. Because you can sort of say to yourself, well, if that's true, if that's a great lesson, if that is the lesson that life teaches us, why don't we just go back to where we were? But you can't. And Shaw writes a rather poignant little speech for Eliza on this topic. Last night, she spent the previous night wandering around London. Last night when I was wandering about, a girl spoke to me. And I tried to get back into the old way with her, but it was no use. You told me, that when a child is brought to a foreign country, it picks up the language in a few weeks and forgets its own. Well, I am a child in your country. I have forgotten my own language, and I can speak nothing but yours. You can't unlearn, is Shaw's major lesson. You cannot. No matter how you try, you cannot unlearn. Let's go back to our roots. You can't, because in your roots, you never had all that experience and knowledge that you have developed over a period of time. And he is teaching us that in this particular moment. I think that speech is one of the most poignant in the entire play. It is her punishment. Her punishment is she cannot go back. When the gods wish to punish us, they answer our prayers, and they answered hers, and she didn't like it. Much to Higgins' surprise, that's the Galatea curse, but there is a curse for Higgins for Pygmalion as well, because surprisingly to himself, he surprises himself, the very thought of Eliza leaving comes as a shock. He thought what he had created was done with. It was an exercise, an experiment. He's done it, finished. And then he makes a very strange discovery. He never ever thought of her at very best as a pal, a mate, one of the three chaps, himself, Pickering, and Eliza. But he has failed to realize that what he has created from the common clay was a new person who was now an intrinsic part of himself. Because all gods make all their creations in their own image, to some extent. And what he has created fulfilled the ego within him that said, I can do this. And she represents to him something much more special than he ever expected. Not that he found it a very easy thing to express. His intrinsic selfishness will always get in the way. But he does make a confession on that point, and it's a beauty, and it also contains one of the most famous cue for song moments in theatre. I know that many, many years ago I played Higgins, and I always remember every single night on this line, you could hear the audience have an intake of breath, expecting to hear a theme come. The line goes, you never asked yourself, I suppose, whether I could do without you. I can do without anybody. I have my own soul, my own spark of divine fire. But I shall miss you, Eliza. I've learned something from your idiotic notions. I confess that humbly and gratefully. And I have grown accustomed to your voice and appearance. I rather like them. Every night, I swear to God, every night. I have grown accustomed, da-da-dee-da-da. Anyway, but the point is, that line is, it's so right they use that as the base for a song. I have grown accustomed to your voice and appearance. He created that voice and that appearance. It is an intrinsic part of himself now. Eliza the new, the Galatea he created, is himself, or at least a profound reflection of what his vision of perfect beauty should be. That it should sound beautiful, that it should look elegant. It's his own concept of beauty, but it is part of him, and he cannot escape that. And again, I think deep down inside the script, which is very funny, there are these great truths. How did Shaw feel about the adaptation of the ending? Good question, Grace. I'll come to that in a second. Higgins, at the end, wants to prove his skill and takes pride in his success. He made the common clay live anew and in a kind of transformation. But the gods punished him by making his creation both completely independent of him and a profound reflection of his own desire, of his own wishes. And Eliza will get her vengeance. Eliza will use all he taught her to teach others. She will pay it forward. She will take the skills that he used to create her, and from that, she will create others. She will clone London with Up Jump Flower Girls. She will make it a common thing. She will make, in other words, it's the egalitarian move. She is now going to go out there and liberate everyone with the very technique that made her unique. But she'll also teach everybody what Pickering taught her as the way of behaving to others, that the way to behave to others is to give them the respect that you wish for yourself. Shaw made a wonderful one-liner on the topic. Do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Their tastes may be different. But he is right in this sense, that you should do unto others what you want them to do to you. You should treat them with the respect that you expect from them. It is a two-way street. And in this play, he's demonstrating it. So both she and he, Higgins and Eliza, may have not got what they think they wanted, but in the act of transformation, that act worked both ways. Out of the common clay of both of them, two new people begin to appear, and neither of them are the people they expected to appear. Higgins thought he would not change, and change he has. Eliza thought she would be one thing, and she is something else entirely. Shaw has this major lesson for us, the major lesson for all of us. It's about understanding who we are and what we truly want to be, and about who others are and how we should truly behave towards them, to treat all of us, everyone, as if we were a lady or a gentleman, no matter how that person may sound or look or think. We treat everyone with the respect we deserve, and it'll be a better world. Grace, you asked a very good question. How do you feel? Now, this has gone through many transformations. In the movie that he wrote, the one with Wendy Hiller, and who was a wonderful Eliza Doolittle. I worked with her once on a movie when she was of considerable age and I was still relatively young. Wonderful, remarkable actress. But the movie she made with Leslie Howard had a slightly, in the screenplay that they wrote for it, the final lines were of him laughing his head off, saying she'll marry Freddie. Freddie, you know, the useless Freddie, the idiot Freddie. That's all that she's fit for. That's all she did. And Shaw had him in fits of laughter at that. When we did the production, which I played Higgins, we used that final sequence because the scripts can be moved around. But the thought we had and the discussion with the director was that he should be saying that and he should laugh and suddenly realize that he's laughing at himself, that he's the fool and that he's lost her. And that is there implicit within the text that went before it, because she has become a part of him. She is a reflection of him. His transformation of her transformed himself. The one in the musical, you know, Where's My Bloody Slippers or whatever it is, was, I don't think Shaw would have liked that she comes back. I don't think he would have liked that because I don't think she should come back. Well, that's just me, but I think Shaw didn't think she should come back. I think the movie and the musical just wanted to tie it up with a nice ribbon as a happy ending, which is not exactly what Shaw would particularly like. Yeah, Pickering is the second time we did it at the Gate, I played Pickering. I always wanted to play Doolittle, the father. I haven't talked about him. I could do another, in fact, I will do another webinar on the topic of Doolittle and his political implications. I will do that soon. But Pickering is he is the perfect epitome of a true gentleman, not a phony gentleman, a true gentleman. And how a true gentleman, because he is that example. He is, if you like, he is the blue fairy for Pinocchio, the one who says, this is what it is like. This is how you become a real boy. This is how you become a real lady, by treating everybody else like a real lady. So Pickering is a very important character in that context. As I say, I haven't mentioned Doolittle at all in this. And Doolittle, the whole Doolittle story is utterly fascinating because if you read the play with care, Doolittle himself knows what he wants, knows what he would wish for, and the gods punish him by giving it to him in a very, very big way. But Doolittle is also he's a very political animal. And Shaw is using the character for political polemic. It makes him fan. Yeah, I think I will. In a few weeks' time, I'll do a webinar on the topic of Doolittle and why he's named that, because he's a truly interesting character. So we're coming. Oh my God, we're past time. I've done it again. Have we any other questions out there? If not, please send your emails to us, and we will get back to you. I promise. I do try to answer everything that comes in. And Ken, I think you had the thing up. Yeah, I'd love to see the play done again. I love this play. Maybe this time they'll let me play Doolittle, but or Eliza. But it's a play that should be done every now and again in every city as a serious reminder of how we should behave to one another. I love it for that reason. So anyway, that's it for this week. Next week, we are doing part 2 of our examination of the Harlem Renaissance. Tome Cousin will be back, and we're going to talk next week more about the effect it had and what grew out of it. And last week we talked about what went into it. Now we're going to talk about what came out of it. And then the week after that, we have Montez joining us. We're going to talk about the incredible Maya Angelou and her poetry. Most of my viewers, I assume, will understand and know who she was. If you don't, tune in, because you will learn something very, very special. Again, we thank the Allegheny Foundation. Again, we say to you, if you have a few dollars or euro to spare, please go to the website, click on the donate button. Every dollar counts. We are now on the countdown to the end of this technical year, and we begin in July with the announcement and move towards the 25th season, which is going to be very special. And we do need all the help we can get, especially in these times. So if you can send us a few dollars, never think, oh, that's not enough. It is. Every donation matters. In the meantime, I hope the weather improves in Ireland and Holland and other places. I hope it gets a little cooler here in Pittsburgh. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you all next Friday. Bye.